So this lecture comes from 1963, and it's called Esau, Jacob, and Israel. And for clarity's sake, we're going to focus on Esau and Jacob, which are really two personifications of certain perceptions that we hold, or types of awarenesses that we have. They're personified in the story, but really they're not people like you and I are people. And you can read countless interpretations of this story. There are many that you can read, and they all, in my opinion, fail miserably at missing the mark of what it really means. And I think Neville, in my opinion, he understands the story better than anyone I've ever read before. And so if you don't know the story, let me just go over it briefly. It's a very simple story, but it's an eternal story, meaning it's always happening within us. But it's simply personified as a story. And so the story goes like this. It's a woman named Rebecca and a man named Isaac. Isaac is blind, but they have two children. She gives birth to two children. And they're two sons that are given birth to. And they're born at the same time. But the first son's name is Esau, that's born first. It's born with red hair. The second son that comes after him is called Jacob, and he's smooth skinned. But Jacob was holding on to the heel of Esau, so they're connected. But Esau comes first. The reason why that's important is because since he's the firstborn, he's given the birthright. He's given the inheritance, the blessing. Well, Rebecca didn't like that because Rebecca loved Jacob more than Esau, and Rebecca wanted Jacob to have the blessing. And as time passed, the father was going to pass away. He set up an agreement with Esau he told him, go hunting and go gather some food for me. And when you come back, I'll give you your blessing. Rebecca overheard this agreement and decided to devise a plan for Jacob to get that blessing. And what she decided to do, since he was smooth-skinned, she was going to put hair over his skin to appear like Esau. But Isaac is blind, remember. And so she tells Jacob, go in there and go talk to your father and get the blessing. And so he walks into the room and Isaac asks, is that you, Esau? And he says, yes, it's me. He said, well, you sound like Jacob, but come here, let me feel you. And then he feels I guess in the sense it would be fake hair. He feels the hair on him. He says, you sound like Jacob, but you feel like Esau. And so he basically was deceived and thought that, okay, well, it must be Esau. So he goes, fine, I'll give you the blessing. He gives it to him, and then Esau comes in and realizes that he wasn't given the blessing. It was given to Jacob, but Jacob and Rebekah deceived Isaac. And Isaac basically says, I already gave the blessing away. There's nothing I can do about it. It's a done deal. And so that's the story. Now, if you read it on its surface level, you're going to think it's not true and it's silly. But it's actually practical. And it's a story that exists within us. We are Rebekah. We are Isaac. We are the blind Isaac. We are Jacob and Esau. Now, Neville goes into the story or into the interpretation by basically claiming that you and I are familiar already with Esau. We already know who Esau is. Esau is the outer man. He describes it as Esau being the outer man and Jacob being the inner man. Now, Esau is what everyone is. Everyone is aware of Esau. So if someone judges solely after the senses, they're Esau. If they worship false gods on the outside, they're Esau. They are in the state of Esau. They are being Esau, essentially. Scripturally, they're being Esau. They only solely focus on the outside. That's Esau. And so when I'm talking to people or someone is deep entrenched in desire, I'm speaking to Esau, essentially. Like, I understand I'm speaking to a person, and I understand they have their own personality and their own ideas, but essentially I'm speaking to Esau. And Neville is asking us to practice or use Jacob. And that's the goal, is to gather practice of Jacob. So not many people, everyone might be aware of Esau, but not many people are aware of Jacob. Now, Jacob is the inner man, the one who goes beyond our senses and our reason and can sort of mimic the outside within us. You ever have a dream that feels so real? Well, why does it feel real? Because it mimicked the flesh, it mimicked the outside, it mimicked the hair in a sense. It feels real. And so when we close our eyes, we become blind just like Isaac to our worlds. We send Esau hunting. We send him our awareness of our outside away from us. And we deceive ourselves into being who we want to be. It's really like a fooling. Like Neville even said in the lecture, well, how well can I fool myself into being what I want to be? And as Blake said, a fool who persists in his folly becomes wise. And so how can I fool myself? How much can I fool myself into being what I want to be? That's practicing Jacob. And he gives an example. And one of the examples he gives is that there was a man who was an engineer, and he wanted to work at a different company. And this company was going to pay him, I think at the time, $20,000 more. Now, at the time, that was a lot of money. In our time, that's not a lot of money. But in his time, that was a lot of money. And Neville told him, well, why don't do you know where you would want to work? What building? He says, yeah, I do know. He goes, okay, do you know like the room? He says, yes, I know exactly what floor I would work on. He goes, okay, so then why don't you imagine yourself simply taking your hat off and putting it on the hat rack, taking your jacket off and putting it on the coat rack, and sit at your desk and just simply do that and just make it natural. He really emphasized the idea of making it natural. So although it might feel at times like you might feel elated that you have what you want, when you persist in it, it starts to feel natural that you have this. It's very important that we reach a level of naturalness because we experience life naturally. And that would be using Jacob to mimic Esau, to mimic the outside. That's essentially what's happening here. And the man did that. And he ended up receiving that job. Now Neville said, could he have asked for more money? He goes, I think so. I think he could have. But he wanted 20 more thousand. That's what he got. And he imagined just having it. That's all he would do, right? If he actually had it, what would he do? He goes, I would. So the guy imagined himself on the elevator. He imagined himself walking off the elevator. He imagined himself just taking his hat off. Very simple stuff that you otherwise would normally do if you had the thing. That's Jacob. And then he ended up passing away 5 years later. And Neville said, yeah, but he discovered Jacob and he practiced Jacob. Now, that's really Neville's point, is that he's trying to get you to discover who Jacob is. And again, it's who am I really worshiping here? Is it Esau or Jacob? What am I really bowing down to? Am I bowing down to what I've imagined, which would be Jacob, or am I bowing down to Esau? Now, it's good to personify these things because it brings a level of clarity. I understand in our time we sort of say things like 3D and 4D. I don't tend to use those terms because I love the illustration of it all. I love the personification of things. It makes more sense to me when I see it that way. When I sort of add a human element to it, a personhood to it. And then I represent those characters to myself, and I see how it's a drama that's actually unfolding within us, within all of us. We're always, in a sense, battling in between these two things. And it says that in Rebecca's womb, these two were sort of fighting each other. Now that's us. We're Rebecca. Within ourselves, we sort of fight with these two perceptions. One is outside and one is inside. But Jacob, again, is a deceiver. It's self-persuasion, not other persuasion. I'm persuading myself that I am what I want to be. I'm persuading myself only. I'm Isaac. I'm not persuading something outside of me. I'm not trying to convince them outside. I'm convincing myself. That is what we're doing. And so although you might know the existence of Esau, as we all do, we've become aware now of a different existence called Jacob, a different being, if you will, called Jacob. And when you decide to believe in what you've imagined, you're exercising Jacob. And you live upon it. You speak within yourself from the premise that it is so. You don't have to do anything to make it so. You imagine as if it is so. If imagining creates reality, it'd be wise for me to imagine from the premise of fulfilled desire, not from a premise of hoping my desire will be fulfilled. I speak as if it already is within myself. And I do that I do that to deceive myself, to convince myself, to persuade myself. And I say that because you'll find many people trying to persuade the outside, trying to manipulate it so they can actually convince themselves of something within. That's Esau. Esau's always focused on the outside, always the external. Esau says there's 4 months until harvest. Esau says no shorts until May. That's what Esau says. And I just say good luck to Esau. I try to remove Esau from my mind. Good luck to him. I'm not going to worship that anymore. I'm not going to follow that. Who am I serving? Am I serving Esau? Am I serving Jacob? Am I serving my imagination and following it? Or am I obeying the orders of Esau and telling me that I'm not this or I'm not that or I must have this first? What rule did I follow? Am I following on the outside that I think I have to follow? That clearly Jacob doesn't have to follow it. I can just deceive myself, persuade myself. Jacob goes beyond Esau. Jacob goes beyond and it says that eventually the younger will serve the older. And so in this case, Esau was the older. Jacob was the younger, and the older was gonna serve the younger. So if this is happening within me, eventually my imagination or my Jacob within me will be served. The external will eventually start to serve my internal. And then he goes on again to explain that horrific looking being inside of him that was all of his combined thoughts of violence, of evil. This is Neville speaking, that he said that there's a being within him that was the personification of everything that he thought that was unlovely. And then he also saw a noble being that was every thought that he thought in a loving way. That was a combined personification of everything that he thought that was good and noble. And he addressed it by showing compassion to, he called it Esau, which was this hairy looking being. And then it disappeared. He gained all his energy back from it. Now, I've had my experience differently with that being, but the way I addressed it was a bit differently. And so I recently had an experience where I didn't see this hairy figure. I saw almost a spider-like figure with a human head on it, and it was horrid. And I could tell it was all the things I could actually feel from it. This is the embodiment of all the things I think that aren't lovely. Like, I could just tell by looking at it. And I tried to speak to it within myself. I told it to go away. I told it, you're not welcome here. And it didn't matter. Like, no matter what I said to it, it didn't matter. And then I had this sudden urge to stare right at it. I stared right at it. And I said, I'm not going to be afraid of it anymore. And then I enlarged myself. And the moment I enlarged myself, that's when it disappeared. And I gained all my energy back. So I went a different route. I didn't show it compassion, but I enlarged myself. That was the way I needed to do it. So it's a bit different, but take what you will from that. The next time you sort of find yourself terrified on the inside, enlarge yourself, and it will make that whatever thought you're having, whatever being that is scaring you, it will become so tiny in comparison. And then it goes away. And so no matter how many times I pled with it, or I was pleading with it, just please go away, please go. It didn't matter. It was there. And I didn't show it compassion, but I did enlarge myself. And that's what made it disappear. And I haven't felt the same since. You feel rejuvenated, as Neville says. You realize that all the times you're worrying and you're fearing and you're creating something out of envy and hatred, it takes all the energy from you. You don't realize it while you're doing it. You're indulging in it. You don't realize it, but you're feeding this monstrous thing within you. But the moment you stop fearing it, you stop feeding it. You stop fearing things within you. You start, whatever you're afraid of, you face it completely. You look right at it and you don't feel afraid of it. You refuse to be scared of things within you. And that's how you conquer your fears within. That's how you do it. It's not, you don't have to go on stage to overcome a fear. You don't have to fall out of a plane to overcome a fear. You don't have to do any of that. The fear is within you. It's something you face. You face it dead on as I did, and you enlarge yourself. You stop feeling so tiny in front of it. And so I'm actually going to end it here on this video. The reason why I don't speak about Israel is just Jacob. As I said, it's basically the physical man, and then it's the psychological man, and it's the spiritual man. And these three, eventually Esau is gone, and then left is Jacob, and then Jacob goes after God's own heart and gets transformed into Israel, which is the spiritual man. But I don't want to get into that right now. I just wanted to give us, just kind of talk about this lecture. It's a personification of certain perceptions that we hold. Now, you can have an inner perception that goes beyond your reason. You do have this. That's Jacob. Now, exercise him. Try to put him to the test. If he is skilled at rearranging things, put him to the test. If he's a deceiver, then let him deceive me into being what I want to be. And let's see if I become it. A fool who persists in his folly becomes wise, as Blake said, so let me persist in my folly. Let the world think it's foolish, but I'm going to envision myself. I see myself inside myself, already the thing I want to be. Do I believe that? Am I persuaded enough? If I'm not persuaded, then let me keep persuading myself. Let me find a way to put hair on it and make it feel real to me. What can I do inside of me that feels real? That convinces me that I already am that thing. For some reason, enlarging myself, that's what made the fears kind of dwindle within me. And so it was not necessarily an enemy. It was just revealing to me myself. So I wouldn't go to claim that being was an enemy. I didn't feel that. I did feel like it was a part of me. And it was a part of me that I've neglected. And it was actually a part of me I was scared of. I was really afraid of this part of me that I didn't know what to do with it. And I've thought that with forcing words upon it and trying to force it out, it was going to work. And I didn't want to look at it. I became frightened. And this happened before bedtime. And instead of becoming frightened, I decided to look right at it. Looked right at it. And I enlarged myself. And it just dwindled. It just went away. And all the energy that was in that thing came back to me. But it was almost like it was cleansed. That's what I would say. It felt like a clean energy back. And I was able to now use this energy to create something different. And so don't go around thinking that you don't have this thing within you. This story is within all of us. That monstrous being is, in a sense, an eternal being that is within every single person. It's the embodiment of all that we think that is violent, unlovely, things that we know aren't good, that we've indulged in. It all goes somewhere, and it personifies itself or embodies itself in a being. But don't be afraid of it. It's not its fault, as Neville said. It's what we've given birth to within us. It's not its fault. And so that's why Neville showed compassion to it. He saw it as it was birthed from him, because we're Rebecca, remember? Don't think of it as anything physical. It's all happening within the individual at all times. I don't care where you're at in life. You just be at a restaurant eating food. You're practicing in this story, in this eternal drama. While you're eating the food, you're imagining something. You're deceiving yourself in some way about something. And a lot of the times it's just a story that you're telling yourself. Whether you think that story is true or not is up to you. You don't have to think it's true. You can change the narrative. You can change the script. You are the director, the actor, and the writer within yourself. There can't be another within you. But that's all this is. All these things is the embodiment. That's all Jacob is. It's just the personification of the inner perspective. Perception, if you will. That goes beyond your reason. And clothes itself to appear like reality. And that convinces you that it's real. And you will, if you practice it enough, you will be able to touch things within yourself. It will feel physically real. And you have to ask yourself at that point that my imagination has the ability to mimic reality to a 1-to-1 degree. It makes you question everything about reality. But before you go there, just start testing Jacob. Start testing this being within yourself. And trust that it has the ways and means to execute it. That's what it's good at. It's really not calling you to do it. That's why Neville took all responsibility off himself. He says it's not up to me to do it. All I'm asked is to imagine it. And so like that engineer, he imagined himself simply taking his coat and putting it on the coat rack. Simply working there. That's what he wanted. Now you might not want that. Whatever it is you do want, start to just do it naturally inside. Every day, just do it naturally. Fall asleep naturally doing that thing. And you'll find yourself naturally doing it in this world, and it will feel like it would have happened anyway. Neville says if you start to go down that path, that thinking that everything's a coincidence and that things just would have happened anyways, then you're going to stop exercising Jacob. You're going to stop doing it because you've fallen victim to this idea that everything's just so random. It's just a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence, not after this. And so if I have things that are happening within me that are happening outside of me that I'm totally unaware of or why it's happening, then I must be unaware of what I'm doing within myself. And I have noticed at times I am unaware of what I'm doing within myself. I'm totally there are certain thought patterns, certain paths that I go down in my mind that are so normal. They're not good for me, but they're so normal that I don't realize I'm even doing it until I realize I'm doing it. And the moment I realize I'm doing it, now I'm given a choice. A new path opens up and it's telling me, do you want to go down this path or do you want to go that path? It's really just a trail in the woods. Which one am I going to take? That's essentially what's happening every time I become aware of something. A new path is formed and you decide to walk down it. You're always walking within yourself. Where are you walking? I don't know. That's something you'd have to answer within you. But I noticed that I was walking and I was walking aimlessly at times. I didn't even know where I was going inside myself. I was completely lost in my own thought, completely lost in the world of imagination. I didn't know where to go. But the reason why I didn't know where to go is because I thought I couldn't have anything. When I started to see I could have things in my own imagination, when I realized I have ownership inside this place, then it became kind of obvious what I should imagine. But it wasn't until then I was sort of lost. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what to imagine. I didn't know how to imagine. And after reading Neville's work and practicing, I've learned all those things. And so there's not really an excuse for me anymore. When I find myself in trouble inside or I find myself in trouble on the outside, I have to ask myself, what am I imagining? What am I doing? That's why Blake opened up his poem and said, the poem of Jerusalem, "O powerful human words, what have I said?" He's asking himself, what did he say in the past? Because he doesn't remember. And I don't remember at times what I have imagined. And like I said, I don't even know sometimes while I'm even doing it, I won't be totally aware of what I'm doing. But it's learning to tame this imagination, learning to take, I don't like to use the word control, because control comes from fear. But you should see it as when you go to imagine, instead of trying to control your mind, or control your imagination, learn to guide it. Just like a horse, you learn to guide it. Let it go, but guide. That's what I would recommend. And so I'm actually going to end it here now. And like I said, I'm going live tomorrow, actually, at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's going to be for members. And like I said, I will do a public one in the future, so keep a lookout for that. But thanks for listening.